Okay, class, good morning once again. This time, again, for us to start our research, it's very important for us to read a lot of review of related literature and related studies. An internet-mediated research can take place in a range of settings. For example, email, chat rooms, web pages, and social media like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and others, and the various forms of instant messaging. So this can pose specific ethics dilemmas. No, what constitute privacy in an online environment must be considered, because in our research we provide to have an ethical considerations. How easy is to get the informed consent from the participants in the community being researched? No, because how will be able to deal with this? How do they secure? No, for example, if I'm the participants of the study, how sure I am that my data or informations are secured? No, in a sense of a data privacy issues. No, so what informed consent entails in the context? Because information provided in forums, social medias, or spaces on the internet that are intentionally public would be considered in the public domain. But the public nature of any communications or information in the internet or through social media should always be critically examined. So the identify of individuals should be protected wherever possible unless identified disclosure is critical to the research, such as in statement by public officials or permission has been sought. So for research that involves the use of social media, researchers will also need to abide by the regulations set by the data producers, subjects to such regulations being consistent with legal and ethical guidelines. Okay, to give us more details about the topic, let us all welcome Sir Bautista. Go ahead.
Classmates, and good day, Dean Marmelo Abante. I'm Jervin Rensti Bautista, and I will be presenting to you the introduction to research, particularly the internet-mediated research and how to select a topic. Internet-mediated research, interchangeably referred as to online research, refers to the collection of research data is made possible by being connected through the internet to a functional online environment, such as online surveys, software or websites, online forums, and social networking sites. Internet-mediated research is well used as it provides data from a single click away, especially in this time of pandemic when limited movement is implemented. Going to libraries and the like are much less popular as medium for going onto research. There are two approaches that are known to do the IMR, or the internet-mediated research, and there's distinction between reactive and non-reactive methodologies. Reactive approach. Participants interact with materials such as online surveys, online interviews, or online experimental tasks. Non-reactive approach is the researcher makes use of data which is collected discretely, data mining or observations. Online questionnaires or surveys are becoming increasingly popular as a form of data collection for research. Some commonly used and example ones are Qualtrics, Bristol Online, and SurveyMonkey. One thing that is useful to gather data from other people online is surveys. Some things to be mindful when using surveys relative to hard copy questionnaires, which will be enumerated on the next slide. When using online survey as a form of your internet-mediated research, you must take note of the following, which I have enumerated on this slide. First is the platform. Participants will have a range of platforms on which to complete an online survey. Many will use a smartphone. Make sure when building your online survey that you use settings and options which is mobile compatible for a better user experience in these participants. Uptake and dropout. These are both greatly different from hard copy questionnaires, in which a researcher is typically present. Uptake is usually much lower, and dropout is considerably increased with online formats of surveys. Context. Participants will be completing online surveys in range of different places, such as on the bus, in front of DB, and the like. Be aware that there are may be more noise or distractions in these options or option relative to more controlled settings when doing hard copy questionnaires. Consent. Participants will not be able to sign a consent form as per a hard copy form. Set up a new page as your consent page with your consent statements as separate checkbox questions. Your participants are then asked to check each next to each of these as an active form of consent. Confidentiality. Remember that confidentiality of online data will also need to be maintained through it being stored on a password-protected survey software or website. Anonymity. To ensure you have some way of corroborating a participant with their data should they choose to withdraw after taking part, set up an open-ended text box on the consent form and ask participants to provide a memorable code or password on there. Withdrawal. Within the briefing stage, let participants know that they can withdraw during the study simply by closing their internet browser or internet app. Intellectual property. Some instruments and measures may have copyright stipulations which mean they could not be published online. Be aware of this in selecting research instruments in IMR. Voluntary participation. Most online survey software give researchers the option of whether they want to make questions mandatory. For example, a participant must answer all the questions on the page in order to progress onwards. Arguably, this is best avoided as it is imposing a level of force in the process which wouldn't exist in a hard copy format. And lastly, bots. You may find erroneous data which has come from bots. Bots are automated apps which are programmed to do tasks. With this, there are more things to consider when using bots. When using bots, number 1, include advanced branch logic in your survey. Second, include some open-ended questions. Number 3, ask similar questions a few times to check for consistency. And last, have a filler item which asks participant to respond in a certain way. Using interview or focus groups as your internet-mediated research. There are a great deal of commercially available online communication tools which can be used to host interviews and focus groups. Many of these offer free versions and may be appealing to use as a way of conducting interviews. There are a number of things to bear in mind when selecting appropriate online software or website. I have enumerated all of these. First is confidentiality. Do not use software which uses third-party hosts with users' data. Also, make sure that the software you select is end-to-end encrypted. Second, consent. Gaining an audio statement of consent alongside an electronic consent form may be typical to use. Antivirus. Any devices which are being used for interviews should have appropriate and up-to-date antivirus software installed. Internet network. When conducting interviews, use private Wi-Fi networks such as home or university network and avoid less secure public networks. App permissions. Many online communication software operate as apps, so be aware of what permissions you and your participants may need to accept if you choose to use this. These permissions may include giving access to device features such as camera, microphone, storage, and contacts. Authentication. Make sure any devices you are using to conduct interviews and store any audio data has secure authentications, like passwords, biometrics such as face, voice, or fingerprint identification. Recording. Does the software have the function to make a recording to ensure you have an accurate and full account of the interview? Capacity. If you're doing focus groups, Does the software have a maximum capacity on audio or video calls? Time zones. Given that you may be recruiting widely, it may be that your participants may be geographically dispersed. Some may be in different time zones, so be aware of this when setting up mutually convenient times for interviews. Using the smartphone data as your internet-mediated research. Recent researches has made a good use of smartphone apps to understand people's online behavior. This can help give more accurate data on screen use than self-reports can. Some considerations for using smartphone to gain objective data are enumerated. First is gaining consent. This would typically be done as per the usual consent process of recruiting participants at the start of research and obtaining informed consent. Metrics or what metrics? It may be your research is focused on overall screen time or maybe more focused on specific app usage or perhaps both. Make sure your participants are aware which apps are the focus of the study. Practicalities. Features such as Apple Screen Time, app records, use all apps, websites, etc. the users has visited. Be aware that participants themselves can change their settings to block themselves using certain apps and set limit on how much time they use these apps. Make sure participants are aware that changing settings midway through their participation in research may confound the data. Include some briefing information on how you prefer your participants to respond to this issue. Next is using online data in your internet-mediated research. This may be using Twitter posts or other forms of publicly available online data on which to undertake secondary data analysis. Bear in mind these things. First is the anonymity. Never use quotes from participants in the reporting of the work. This can be reverse searched to identify participants. Privacy. Only use data which is in public domain, which is accessible without the need for a login or authentication or requesting access. Informed consent. As only public platforms are being used, users are behaving in what are deemed to be in public spaces, with the notion that this behavior is observable to anyone. Therefore, no informed consent is needed for obtaining publicly accessible data. Advertising. Internet-mediated research advertising advices. As with any research, make sure any written advertising had been approved ethically alongside with other ethics documentations. Adverts should be concise, user-friendly, and informative. If you are advertising on social media or advertising in social media, carefully consider which communities are representative and relevant to the state and state this in your ethics documentation. This may be specific Facebook groups, community pages, your own profile, etc. Do not assume that posting adverts on your own social media platform will garner the most representative sample for all types of research. If advertising on social media, also consider the use of an image with the key detail on to supplement your text advert. This may allow you to include additional information which may not fit onto platforms which have character limits. It is a good practice to make sure images have alternative text added to them when uploaded online. Be aware be aware that advertising online may allow information about you to be publicly available, such as profile photos, bio informations, or university name. Make sure you check your profile information on any platforms are not revealing anything you do not want the world to see. Last is be considerate to online communities you are seeking help from. Engage in these communities prior to your research, build a rapport, come back to any adverts to check whether the people have asked questions, and, and return to show thanks at the end of the research process. Next thing that I will discuss on my report is selecting a topic for business research.
Okay, so again, as what I mentioned, it's very important because at present, since pandemic, the main issue at present actually is the internet, no, internet mediated, no, on research, no, because again, the potential identifiability of online sources as well as ethics debates about how privacy is constituted in digital context means that full ethics review may be appropriate for research involving these communities. Let's say, for example, no, people often assume that social media sources are public domain, but it is quite likely that some service users, including children, may not understand the implication of what they are doing. In those harvesting data may also uncover illegal images or activities. No? Researchers should assess the risk of making such as discovery and consider their legal and ethical obligations. Research participants, and reviewers of research ethics will often encounter new or unfamiliar ethics questions and dilemmas. And there is a growing literature on ethics on online research. No? A good starting point is the Association of Internet Researcher, no? Ethical Decision Making and Internet Research of 2012. No? In this fast developing area, research ethics committees may need to involve an independent expert in assessing research proposal that break a new ground.